My name is Dr. Lena Hart. I've signed more consent forms in my life than I can count. But there was one form I never got to sign, because he left before I could hand it to him. It's been 16 years since Jacob walked out. He didn't slam a door. He didn't throw a tantrum. He didn't even raise his voice. Just one perfectly calm, cruel sentence. "This isn't the life I want, Lena." I remember standing in the kitchen barefoot, holding the ultrasound photo like it was radioactive. I had just told him. The room still smelled like burnt toast and lemon dish soap. I thought he'd be shocked, maybe overwhelmed, but happy. I was wrong. He reached for his coat, paused, and walked out as if he were leaving a meeting early. He didn't call. He didn't text. And when I tried to tell him I was keeping the baby, the number was already disconnected. I was 28, broke, and in my first year of residency. My body ached all the time. I wore the same 2 pairs of scrubs until the seams begged for mercy. Every night I read about embryonic development while eating ramen over medical textbooks. I learned how to intubate and swaddle in the same semester. And through all of it, I never heard from Jacob again. But now, 16 years later, I was about to see him. Not on purpose. Not in a coffee shop with awkward smiles. He was coming to my operating room. "Dr. Hart, trauma 1 incoming. Male, 42, blunt chest trauma." The voice over the hospital intercom sliced through the din of alarms, beeping monitors, and overworked staff. I was halfway through a consult when the page came through. "Male patient, 42 years old, severe chest injuries, unknown history. Be ready for a cardiac rupture," I told my team. "Prep OR. 3. When they wheeled him in, I almost didn't recognize him. Jacob. His face was bloated from fluid retention. His skin pale under the harsh lights. There was a deep gash above his left eyebrow, and his torso was a map of bruises and swelling. I stared. Not because I still loved him, I didn't. I had exorcised that ghost a long time ago. But I stared because something primal inside me whispered, "That man left you pregnant on a cold Tuesday afternoon. That man said you weren't his future. And now here he was dying." "He needs immediate surgery," I said, snapping out of it. "Page anesthesia and prep for internal bleeding." One of the nurses handed me his chart. There was barely any information. He'd collapsed at a hotel restaurant after complaining of chest pain and shortness of breath. His companion had fled the scene. A hit and run of the emotional kind. I scanned his blood work. B positive. Healthy vitals a few months ago. Good kidney function, relatively clean labs. No known drug allergies. Family notified. Yes. The nurse nodded. His wife's on the way. Course. Wife. I'd never looked him up over the years. I didn't want the weight of his new life pressing against mine. But now that new life was barreling into mine like a freight train. 30 minutes later, she burst through the surgical wing doors. Heels clicking, face streaked with tears. Lauren. She hadn't aged much. Still had the same glossy hair and designer desperation. She had been my roommate in college. She had met Jacob through me. "Is he going to die?" she choked, grabbing my arm. I pried her fingers off gently. "We're doing everything we can. We'll need consent for emergency intervention." "I'll sign anything," she said without hesitation. "Just save him." I stared at the clipboard. My hand hovered over the spot where she'd sign. Then something clicked. "He's O negative," she whispered. "You'll need to know that." Froze. "No, his file says B positive." Her eyes widened. "That's not right. Jacob's always been O negative. We even made sure when we had a scare on vacation and the doctor." She trailed off. I felt something twist in my gut. 16 years ago, I remember Jacob saying very clearly, "I'm B positive, just like my dad." But now, his wife said otherwise. So what was the truth? My son Noah had just turned 16. Tall, stubborn, funny in a way that made even cynical nurses laugh. He didn't know his father. I told him once that his dad had gone another way in life. a phrase that meant nothing but satisfied his curiosity for a while. But now, if Jacob was O negative and Noah was B positive, that would mean something impossible. I pulled Noah's file, confirmed it. B positive. Jacob couldn't be his biological father. I stood alone in the scrub room, the silence suddenly suffocating. My reflection in the glass looked tired, hollow. I hadn't just raised my son alone. I'd been lied to by omission, by assumption, by believing someone's word 16 years ago when I was vulnerable and in love. Dr. Hart, he's coding. I snapped back into focus and ran into the OR. Jacob's heart had stopped. We shocked him twice. On the third, his pulse returned but weak. His chest cavity was filling with blood. Ruptured aortic valve, I said. We need a graft now. We don't have any matching donor tissue in stock, one of the nurses said. I looked up. There was only one potential emergency match candidate in the system with compatible tissue and immediate availability. A living donor. Noah. Hospitals are built on protocols. Every action logged. Every drop of blood labeled. Every decision documented. That's how I knew what I was about to do wasn't just personal. It was irreversible. We had a critically injured patient, Jacob, and no compatible donor grafts in the blood bank. His life depended on immediate intervention, and the only living match was in my emergency contact list. My son, Noah. I met Noah in the family lounge, where he sat slouched in a hospital hoodie, earbuds half in. He looked up with the typical teen mix of irritation and curiosity. Is someone hurt? He asked, frowning at my face. Yes, I said carefully. It's a patient with a rare case. Internal bleeding. The only compatible graft would have to come from a living donor. The match is you. His expression didn't shift at first. Then came the slow realization. You want my tissue. For some guy I don't even know. He's not just some guy. That's when I saw it, the flicker of confusion in his eyes. And I knew the next thing I said would split his life into before and after. He's the man I believed was your father. The silence that followed was too sharp to breathe through. Noah stared at me, eyes narrowing. What do you mean, believed? Things have changed, I said quietly. I was told he told me that he was B positive. That's how I assumed he was your biological father. But his current labs say he's O negative. And you're not. That means I'm not his. He nodded. Noah leaned back, rubbing his forehead like he was trying to press the truth back into my mouth. So let me get this straight. You want me to go into surgery? For the guy who ghosted you when you were pregnant? And who isn't even my dad? I said nothing. He wasn't wrong. I'm not asking you to do it for him, I finally said. I'm asking if you'd do it for you. To be the kind of man who can look in the mirror and know he did the right thing, even when the person didn't deserve it. Noah folded his arms. What if I don't want to be that guy? You get to decide that. I won't pressure you. There was a long pause. Then he asked, is his wife here? Yes. Does she know I exist? No. She was my roommate once. A long time ago. He blinked slowly, processing. So she stole your boyfriend. And now she's crying down the hall while you ask me to save him? That's one way to put it. Noah sat up straighter. Then I want something. In writing. What? If I'm doing this, I want it documented. That I saved his life. That he's not my father. That I existed without him. I want him to sign something. Before or after, I don't care. But I want his name on a piece of paper saying he knows who I am. That I didn't disappear just because he left you. The kid had fire. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. I'll draft it. I promise. 3 hours later, the surgical team was prepped. Noah was prepped. All we needed was the formal consent. It was ironic. All those years ago, Jacob walked out on a responsibility he never acknowledged. Now, on the brink of death, he was signing a form that gave his life over to the son he never claimed. He was groggy but conscious. Lauren hovered beside him, holding his hand. This is Dr. Hart, a nurse explained. She's the lead surgeon. You've been in critical condition. Jacob blinked at me. There was no flicker of recognition, no gasp, just a blank stare. Do I know you? He asked slowly. No, I said. But I knew you once. His brow furrowed. Am I going to die? Not if you sign this, I replied, offering the clipboard. We're using a living donor graft. It's risky, but it's your best chance. He signed with a trembling hand. And just like that, his life was in Noah's hands. He didn't even ask who the donor was. The surgery took 4 hours. Noah's tissue was harvested with precision, every step done with sterile caution. I operated on Jacob myself, hands steady, voice clear. The entire time I kept hearing Noah's words. I want it documented. I had the document drafted and stored, waiting for Jacob to recover enough to read and sign. But a piece of me knew he wouldn't like it. We stabilized him. His vitals held. The bleeding stopped. He lived. And then came the real test. The moment he opened his eyes, fully alert, and saw the name on his wristband. Jacob's voice was hoarse. Lauren hovered beside him like a nervous sparrow. His eyes flicked to the fore, then to me. You said it was a living donor. Yes, I said, standing at the foot of the bed. He's recovering. He's fine. Who is he? I handed him the document. He scanned the top line. Donor name, Noah James Hart. Age, 16. Relationship to patient, declared non-biological. Raised by patient's attending surgeon. Acknowledgement of identity and contribution required by recipient. His hands began to tremble. He looked up. You had a child. I did. Mine. I stared at him. No. His lips parted. Then why would he? Because he thought you were. Because he wanted you to know he existed. Jacob stared at the paper. What the hell is this? It's truth, I said coldly. Something you avoided once. Lauren's face had gone pale. You told me you never had children. That you never got anyone pregnant. He turned toward her. I didn't. Not that I knew of. She's not saying he's yours, Lauren said. She's saying he's not. Jacob blinked. That's right, I said. You were never his father. But for 16 years we thought you were. And when I realized the truth, I gave Noah the choice. He didn't do it for you. He did it for himself. For the kind of man he wants to be. Jacob looked away. I'll sign it, he whispered. We thought that was the end. But nothing in medicine or life is ever that simple. 2 days later, someone from the hospital staff leaked the story. The media pounced. Teen donates life-saving tissue to man who abandoned his pregnant mother. Years later, he wasn't even the father. The article went viral. Reporters crowded the ER entrance. Photographers camped out near the surgical wing. And suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of the drama. A daytime talk show called. Podcast offered money. Jacob's company board. He was a high-level executive now. Started questioning his moral history. Lauren blamed me. You set this up. You wanted to humiliate him. No, I said. He did that all by himself. But the worst part, Noah saw it all. And what started as closure turned into chaos. Hospitals are strange places for fame. There were paparazzi at the parking lot. Nurses whispering in break rooms. A janitor tried to sneak a photo of Noah recovering in the family suite. The moment the story leaked, the hospital became less of a sanctuary and more of a stage. But none of that compared to what arrived in my office 2 days later. An envelope. No return address. Inside, one folded sheet of paper, written in tight, slanted handwriting. It read, Lena, if you're reading this, it means the past finally found you. I should have said something years ago, but I was a coward. Jacob isn't Noah's father. Him. And I never stopped thinking about either of you. My breath caught. My hands shook. I read it again. And again. Only one name came to mind. Darren Langston. Felt like a name out of a dream. He was a classmate during med school, older by a few years. Smart, quiet, kind. We had one hazy weekend together, nothing serious. Just two interns hiding from the world for 48 hours before real life resumed. It happened a few weeks before I met Jacob. At the time, I chalked it up to timing. I didn't think twice when Jacob said he was the father. I was relieved, grateful even. Jacob had the charisma, the career plan, the right background. I wanted it to be his. But now, if what Darren said was true, everything I built, every lie I told myself, every tear I shed over Jacob walking away, had been misdirected. The wrong man had broken my heart. The right man had disappeared without a word. I didn't tell Noah right away. The boy had just saved a man's life and watched the world turn him into a symbol. He was still sore from surgery, still avoiding the internet. But I had to know. I pulled one of Noah's discarded blood samples, called in a personal favor from a lab tech I trusted, quietly sent off the letter and DNA from a glass Darren had once used, which I had, without realizing, stored in a box of old photos. I'd kept it from a dinner party in my first apartment. 3 days later, the result came back. 99.9% match. Noah wasn't Jacob's son. He was Darren's. And Darren had vanished. Again. The media storm had cost Jacob his job. His board cited reputational concerns. His marriage was unraveling. Lauren had moved into a hotel and started talking to a divorce lawyer. I visited him one last time before discharge. His face was thin, his eyes hollow. "You did this," he said. Not with anger, just resignation. "No," I replied. "You did this the moment you left. I didn't know you were pregnant." "Yes, you did." He looked away. "I wasn't ready." "You still aren't," I said quietly. "And you're lucky my son was." He stared at me, then signed the second acknowledgement form, the one where he formally recognized Noah's contribution, publicly and permanently. It wasn't redemption, but it was record. "Why didn't you tell me everything?" he asked me that night. "I didn't know everything," I answered. Then I showed him the letter. He read it in silence. Then again. Then once more. "This guy, Darren, he's my biological father." "Yes. Where is he?" "I don't know." Noah nodded slowly. "Well, at least we know where I didn't come from." That broke something in me. I reached for him, but he stood first. "I need air," he said. "Don't follow me." A week later, we got an offer from a primetime news network. A mother-son exclusive. They wanted to film inside the hospital, show archived footage, and walk the audience through the miracle of forgiveness. We said no. Instead, Noah wrote a letter. Public statement. It went viral again, but for different reasons. I didn't save Jacob Hart because he was my father. I saved him because I didn't want to be like him. I didn't want to disappear when things got hard. I wanted to know I stood for something. I wanted to be the kind of man my mom raised me to be. To anyone watching, you don't need to come from a good father to become one. Sometimes it's enough to know what not to be. The hospital eventually calmed down. The reporters left. The legal chaos subsided. Jacob left the city. Lauren filed for divorce. And Darren never replied to the follow-up letter Noah wrote him. But maybe that was okay. Maybe some answers are meant to remain unanswered. I stood by the window of our small apartment one night, watching Noah eat leftover pasta and laugh at a stupid sitcom. And I thought, he's whole. He's kind. He's mine. 6 months later, Noah was invited to speak at a student leadership summit. I sat in the back of the auditorium, arms folded, watching him take the stage in his rumpled dress shirt and nervous smile. He told his story, not the viral version, the real one. The fear, the confusion, the pressure to decide. And how he found clarity in doing what he hoped someone would have done for him. After the talk, a man in his late 40s approached him, gray around the temples, nervous hands, familiar eyes. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. Noah nodded, shook his hand and said, "I don't need a dad. But if you want to sit down and talk like two men, I'm open to that." The man, Darren, smiled softly and sat down. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.